Chapter 5 of The Airship Boys in the Great War by Lysle F. Cass. This Librivox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Tom Hirsch. Chapter 5, Buck Stewart, and a Warning. It was not a particularly jolly meal at Major Honeywell's that night. The Major was opposed by grave fears of what might happen to his young friends on their journey, and the Airship boys felt the seriousness of the step they were about to take. However, youthful spirits are buoyant, and the good-smelling, appetizing dishes that were served them soon drove away dull gloom and revived the boys' spirits. As Alan said, "What's the use of sitting here staring at each other across the table as if we were at a funeral? Nobody's going to die or even get hurt. It's no use trying to be melancholy on a full stomach, and I, for one, am going to laugh right now." The dessert course was just being served when there came a ring at the doorbell, and a few minutes later the maid announced that a reporter from the Herald wanted to see either Mr. Napier or Mr. Hope. "Show the gentleman right in here," said Major Honeywell after the boys had agreed to see him. The young man who came in was slightly larger and older than either Ned or Alan. He was tall, wiry, and had the cool, assured bearing of one who has survived many rebuffs and still got what he wanted. As he entered the dining-room door, both Ned and Alan sprang to their feet and rushed impulsively to meet him. "Buck Stewart!" they shouted joyously, pumping his arms up and down. "Well, if this isn't both the most unexpected and the luckiest thing! We've been wanting to have a talk with you for 2 days past, and meant to ask the managing editor about you Tuesday, only we were interrupted and got so flustered over it that we left before remembering that you were one of the main reasons for our call." "What good fairy brought you here tonight, Buck?" asked Ned, pulling the newcomer down into a chair at the table and shoving a piece of pie in front of him. "I'd rather eat that pie than talk right now, but I suppose I've got to answer your question first," said Buck. "We reporters always are in hard lines. You ask how I happen to be here. Well, it was this way. The Night City editor called me over about an hour ago and gave me an assignment on you two chaps." "Why, what news is there about us that the Herald could use?" asked Ned, exchanging a rapid glance with Alan and the Major. Buck removed a longing eye from the piece of pie to reply. "We learned in some way that unknown parties had made you a cash offer of something like $325,000 for the Ocean Flyer, and that you turned them down cold. Is that true? Also, who were the people who wanted to buy the Flyer at such an astounding cash figure, and for what purpose did they want it? If you'll give me full details, I'll be much obliged." This, as the reporter pulled a folded bundle of notepaper and a pencil from his pocket. "These prospective buyers didn't represent any one of the warring nations in Europe, did they?" "That's just what we don't know and what we feared," said Alan. "I'm afraid that we can't give you much dope for a story, though, Buck, because we know as little about them as you do." Then he went on to tell about Mr. Phillips, the go-between's mysterious call, and the telephone conversation with the man with a strong German accent. "I'm sure that I've heard his voice somewhere before, and that not so very long ago, too," added Ned. "I've racked my brains ever since trying to place him." "Sounds funny," commented the reporter musingly. "But you certainly haven't given me much of a lead for the story I was after. Well, I'll be going and not interrupt your little party here any further." "Wait a minute, Buck," said Ned. "We haven't told you yet why we wanted to see the Herald's managing editor about you." "That's so," said Buck, sitting down more comfortably in his chair. "Now, if one of you gentlemen will hand me a fork, I'll dispose of this mince pie while you're spinning the yarn." So while the reporter was busy making the pie disappear, Ned told him of Bob Russell's predicament in Belgium and what they proposed to do toward a rescue. "We want you to go with us, Buck," said he, "just as you did the time we made the 12-hour London to New York flight 2 years ago with the coronation pictures for the Herald. The managing editor will surely let you go for the 2 or 3 days needful when you ask him, especially as it will enable the paper to get a representative right at the front with no bull-headed censor to edit his copy." "If the boss won't let me off, I'll throw up the job anyway," shouted Buck, jumping up in great excitement. "Why, Bob Russell and I are old friends, just as you are, and I don't want to leave him in the lurch any more than you do. It's mighty good of you to give me this chance to be one of the rescue party. Count on Buck Stewart, boys, hair, tooth, and nail." The reporter's enthusiasm was contagious. All three sprang to their feet, and with exclamations of mutual pleasure were shaking hands to seal the compact when went the telephone bell. "Ned," called the major, who answered the call, "it's somebody that wants to speak with you personally, a man with a marked German accent." The little company around the dining table stared curiously at each other as Ned Napier took up the receiver. "Hello, this is Mr. Napier." "Yes, I'm one of the owners of the Ocean Flyer. Who is this speaking, and what do you want?" The voice at the other end of the line was harsh and guttural. The words were spoken in a truly menacing tone. "You do not need to know who I am. It is sufficient that I'll warn you. We who are bonded together in this country know this thing that you think of doing. We know that you intend a trip in your flying ship to the war zone. Take our advice. Do not attempt it. You are being closely watched, and we will not hold ourselves responsible for what may happen if you try to carry out your plan. You are young, and life is dear to you. Beware." The telephone clicked abruptly at the other end of the line, and the threatening voice was still. Ned sat as if petrified, his face a study of mingled amazement, indecision, and indignation. "What's the matter, Ned? Who was it? Was it that same person who called up about the flyer?" cried the others, crowding around him. "Yes," replied Ned. "It was the same voice, and I am sure that I have heard it before." Then he went on to tell them of the ominous threats of the mysterious stranger. A chorus of exclamations followed his recital. "The blackguard!" ejaculated Major Honeywell. "We ought to set detectives on his trail." "Small chance of ever catching him that way with the meager clues we have," said Reporter Buck. "Besides, we haven't time to monkey with anything like that, unless, of course, you boys decide that it is better not to risk the enmity of these unknowns. They evidently mean business." Ned's lips had fixed themselves into a grim, straight line, and Allen's frown was no less determined. "All he hopes to do is frighten us into selling the airship to him," said Allen, "and I don't believe that his big threats were anything but sheer bluff. Why, they wouldn't dare attack us right here in the heart of civilized New York. Whoever they are, or whatever they may do, we're not going to let a phone call scare us out of this effort to save Bob Russell," said Ned. "We're all ready to start now, except for getting the Herald's permission to let Buck here go with us. He can see the managing editor about that first thing in the morning, and then we'll be off immediately." "But if this gang really has you boys spied upon, they will certainly make some attempt to stop you," argued Major Honeywell. "Nobody stands any chance of stopping us once we get up in the air," answered Ned. But, as you say, we may as well try to make our getaway as secretly as possible. I would suggest that instead of starting out by daylight tomorrow, as we planned, that we wait until midnight. Each of us can leave his house at a different time during the day, and go about as if we had changed our minds and called the trip off. Then, just in time to reach the Newark factory, each one can start off alone. We should be able to disarm any suspicion in that way. Everybody approved heartily of Ned's scheme, and parted that night with a little more earnestness in their handshakes than usual. All of the road back home, the airship boys cast furtive glances over their shoulders every now and then, but no sign of any followers was visible. End of Chapter 5. Recording by Tom Hirsch.